Let's look at the title of this book. Norman Borlaug and the Green Revolution. Take a minute and think, as you look at the picture of the title of the cover of this book, what do you think this book might be about? Now turn over your graphic organizer, and in the section provided, write down one or two ideas about what you think this book might be about. Hit the pause button now. Let's talk about the genre of this book. The genre of this book is a biography. A biography tells the true story of a person's life and is written by another person. May be about someone who lived in the past or is alive today. Is told in the third person using pronouns such as he and she, and may include photographs and illustrations. Chapter 1. An Iowa Boy. Norman Borlaug and his friends were on their way to school when they were caught in a blizzard. Walking in the wind and cold made Norman exhausted. He decided to lie down in the deep, soft snow. He told his friends he could not keep going. His cousin Cinna made him get back up and keep going. By not letting him stop, she saved his life. Years later, Norman said Cinna inspired him by refusing to let him give up. Norman had to walk to school in all kinds of weather. Norman Borlaug was born on a farm in Iowa in 1914. He was the eldest of 4 children. People in this farming community worked the land to survive. From a young age, Norman had to work on the farm too. He helped his family raise cattle, pigs, and chickens. He also helped them grow oats and corn. In the winter, there were 16 students at his school, but in the summer there were only 10 or 12. The older boys had to help harvest the crops, giving 105%. Norman wrestled in high school. His coach encouraged him to give 105%. This idea helped him to be tough and stronger later in life. Norman Borlaug was made a member of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame in 1992. Use the information you just read on page 2 and 3 to fill in the blanks of the first section of your graphic organizer. Hit the pause button now. When Norman finished high school, his grandfather encouraged him to keep studying. Norman enrolled at the University of Minnesota. He worked to help pay for his education there. This was during the Great Depression. Norman was shocked to meet many desperate, poor people who had lost all they had. One day in college, Norman heard a scientist, Dr. Stockman, talk about microscopic fungus spores called rust that destroys crops. Dr. Stockman said that if they could prevent rust, it would help to end world hunger. Norman was interested in this idea, and he decided to study with Dr. Stockman. Microscopic rust spores are picked up by the wind and carried from plant to plant. Let's think about this question. Who helped Norman become a plant scientist? Chapter 2. Work in Mexico. When he finished college in 1942, Norman Borlaug got a job with a chemical company. Then, in 1944, his former teacher, Dr. Stockman, encouraged him to help solve Mexico's food shortage. Mexico needed more food for its growing population. Borlaug's job was to figure out how to grow more wheat on the land. This would increase the land's yield. He would work together with farmers and scientists to solve the problem. Let's read what the definition of yield is. The only part of a wheat plant used for food is the seed, or grain. Yield is the amount of grain that comes from a piece of land. The higher the yield, the more people can be fed. Let's look at the illustration of a wheat plant. The head of the wheat plant makes up its yield. There was another problem. Mexico's wheat was being ruined by rust fungus. Borlaug needed to breed a new type of wheat that was resistant to rust. This breeding process would normally take 10 to 12 years. Borlaug had to find a faster way. He started working at the Yaqui Valley Experiment Center in Sonora, Mexico. The conditions at the research station were perfect for growing wheat. It was warm and sunny, the soil was fertile, and the land was irrigated. Use the information on pages 4, 5, and 6 to fill in the second section of your graphic organizer. Hit the pause button now. Norman Borlaug had a theory about how to double the rate of breeding new wheat. At that time, scientists normally bred plants in one place. This made it easy to control the conditions and compare the results. The Yaqui Valley was a good place to grow wheat in the winter, but in the summer it was too hot. Borlaug needed to find somewhere else to grow wheat in the summer. Then he could run his experiments all year long. This would speed up the process. Yaqui Valley is sometimes called the home of the Green Revolution because of Borlaug's work there. Let's think about this question. What problem was Norman Borlaug working on in Mexico? Chapter 3. The Answer. Norman Borlaug was energetic in his work. He traveled around Mexico looking for places where wheat would grow in the summer. Hundreds of miles away, in the cooler south, he found two places near each other that seemed perfect. They were the Toluca Valley and Chapingo. Now he could grow wheat all year long. Wheat breeding sites in Mexico. With the help of local farmers, Borlaug started crossbreeding different kinds of wheat in the Yaqui Valley. He spent hours observing each generation of plants. He took notes on their size, how fast they grew, and their resistance to disease. He picked the best plants and crossed them with other good plants. This process resulted in new types of wheat. Borlaug then started moving the new wheat plants to the south. There he continued his observation and crossbreeding of plants. By moving plants between sites with different growing seasons, he doubled the breeding rate of the wheat. This proved that his theory was correct. Borlaug, third from the left, with a group of Mexican farmers in a wheat field. Use the information on pages 7, 8, and 9 to fill in the third section of your graphic organizer. Hit the pause button now. Borlaug and his team developed a new type of wheat that resisted disease. They were excited about the disappearance of the rust, but there was a new problem. The new plants often bent over from the weight of their own grain. They started using shorter plants called dwarfs. The strong, thick stems of these plants helped them to stay up, and they produced more grain. Borlaug crossed the dwarf plants with the taller wheat. He created a new type of wheat that resisted disease and had short, strong stems. Norman Borlaug shows two varieties of wheat. Norman Borlaug worked in Mexico for over 15 years. His work there was a huge success. In the end, he bred more than 40 short, rust-resistant types of high-yield wheat. His system of breeding had another benefit. The new wheat had been grown in different climates, with different numbers of daylight hours. This made it tough and adaptable. It could be grown in many different places and conditions around the world. Wheat yield in 1945, 250,000 tons. Wheat yield in 1965, about 2,500,000 tons. After the new wheat was planted in Mexico, the wheat yield increased. Let's think about this question. How did Borlaug figure out that he could grow wheat all year? Use the information on page 10 and 11 to fill in the fourth section of your graphic organizer. Hit the pause button now. Chapter 4. More wheat for the world. In the 1960s, India and Pakistan were struggling to produce enough food for their populations. Many scientists believed that millions of people could starve. Borlaug shipped hundreds of tons of the new wheat seeds to India and Pakistan. He explained to the people in the government there how to grow them. Mexico, India, and Pakistan. In 1965, Borlaug shipped 450 tons of the new wheat seeds from Mexico to India and Pakistan. Within a few years, the new types of wheat were growing across many parts of India and Pakistan. Yields increased remarkably. This was not just Borlaug seeds that traveled around the world. His ideas started to migrate too. In a flurry of activity, plant breeding stations were set up in India, Pakistan, Canada, the United States, and countries in South America. Scientists began working together as a community. They shared test results and sent each other seeds. They changed their behaviors. It was a whole new way of working. The high-yield wheat grew quickly, but it needed a lot of water and nutrients. Borlaug encouraged farmers to use irrigation and fertilizer. Together, the new plants and these new farming methods were called the Green Revolution. Borlaug taught Indian scientists and farmers about the new wheat. In 1970, Borlaug won the Nobel Peace Prize. Nobody had ever won it for growing plants before. Norman Borlaug is credited with saving 1 billion lives. His innovations transformed farming and helped people see that science and technology could improve farming. He also helped to build a global community of scientists who could work together on solving problems. The effects of his work can still be seen today. Borlaug's ideas helped people all over the world. The Blue Revolution. Before he died at age 95, Norman Borlaug became concerned about a future world shortage of water. He called for a blue revolution to conserve water. Let's think about this question. How did Borlaug's Green Revolution help the world? Use the information on pages 12, 13, and 14 to fill in the last section of your graphic organizer. Hit the pause button now.